Okay, so the first one, and I'm going to put this in here, is called If. This is a picture book that is designed to give us a better understanding of some of the big improbables. So things that are a little bit hard for people minds like myself to understand. So for instance, we have life expectancy. If average life expectancy were represented by footprints in the sand, the average person would leave 70 steps because the average life expectancy is 70 years, but that's not average. So we're going to drill down even further. North Americans would leave 78 steps in the sand because of our life expectancy. People from Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, and the other islands of the Pacific would leave 77 footsteps. Europeans would leave 76. South Americans would leave 74. Asians would leave 70. And Africans would leave 58. What a difference. And then you're going to get a little bit even more information. So a great way to just kind of introduce the concept of drilling down to some basic information. And then I like to pair that with a little bit higher level book called What If? Serious scientific answers to absurd hypothetical questions, or what Kathleen asks on a daily basis. So this one is written by Randall Monroe, who has a website that he calls it Dear Abby for Mad Scientists. So what he's taken is a lot of these questions and has put them into book format. So each section, chapter, whatever you want to call it, starts with a question. For instance, what would happen if you tried to hit a baseball pitched at 90% the speed of light? Well, the answer, as it turns out, would be a lot of things, and they all happen very quickly, and it doesn't end well for the batter or the pitcher. Blah, 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 lots of scientific information, blah, blah, blah. And then he's got this great witty sense of humor, and then he ends with, everything within roughly a mile of the park would be leveled, and a firestorm would engulf the surrounding city. The baseball diamond, now a sizable crater, would be centered a few hundred feet behind the former location of the backstop. Of course, because we need to be accurate in this, Major League Baseball Rule 6.08b suggests that in this situation, the batter would be considered hit by the pitch and would be eligible to advance to first base if they could find it. So again, takes these weird, wonderful, quirky, hypothetical questions and then gives us real science behind it, but has this great, lighthearted writing style that makes it easy and accessible for us non-scientific geeks. And then we have Candace Fleming's newest book, The Family Romanov. Now, if you had told me a year ago that I would be engrossed in Russian history, I would have laughed in your face. And then I got the advanced copy for The Family Romanov, and I have to say, this is one of Candace's best nonfiction works of nonfiction to date. She does such an amazing job encapsulating Russian history, specifically the history of Nicholas and his rise to the throne, his marriage, his family, and then of course their fall from grace, the revolution, and their unfortunate demise. But she writes it in such an engaging way that you forget you are reading actual history. And this for me was a white knuckle read, meaning I held on to this book so tightly because I could not put it down and could not stop reading. Now, if you also have Patricia Polacco's book, The Blessing Cup, these are two great books to pair together because if you're familiar with The Blessing Cup, we know that this is her family's history of how they left Russia. They were a Jewish family who were, as was common in this time, run out of their village. And the Tsar that it's talked about in The Blessing Cup is Tsar Nicholas. And in The Family Romanov, Candace does spend a lot of time talking about how the Tsar and his entourage treated the Jewish population in Russia. So that's a great picture book to pair with Candy's new one. And then we have the Freedom Summer Murders. This past summer was just the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Summer, and so Don Mitchell's new book, The Freedom Summer Murder, introduces us to that time period, but then also takes it the next step and talks about the 3 civil rights workers who were murdered, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, and James Chaney, It talks about their arrival down south, what they were doing, what happened to them that fateful night when they were arrested and then supposedly released, and then the investigation, the lack of trial at the time, and then how justice was finally served. So a great inclusion for any civil rights curriculum. Oops, sorry. We have a new graphic novel out called Line of Fire. This one is based on the actual journal that was discovered in France by Barreau. He was walking by an apartment building that was being emptied out before it was demolished, and there was a bunch of junk, and he was invited to go through and take anything that looked interesting to him. Well, a box appealed to him, and so he took that box home, opened it up, and inside he found the actual journal of an anonymous World War I soldier. So he took that and then added his own illustrations, and we now have this great new graphic novel, Line of Fire. The text is verbatim the journal entries from the soldier. Again, we don't know who it was. His name was never included in the journal. We do know that it starts when he was first heading off to war, so it starts on August 13th of 1914, and then this book just covers through September 12th of 1914, so it's just 100 years ago. But we do know that the actual journal went a little bit further than that. We have no idea what happened to the soldier. We don't know if he survived, if he died. It does talk of an injury that he sustained while he was fighting on the front lines. And then there's also a very heartbreaking moment when, as he's talking about his healing, about trying to get back to the front lines to continue fighting, when he says he wishes that he had just been struck outright by the shell that caused his original injury. It is a no-hold bar account of what actual war and what it is like fighting on the front lines. We are just at the end of Banned Book Week, and this year Banned Book Week had a comic book theme, which is perfect timing for this next book. It's called Masterful Marks, and this is a biography of 16 cartoonists who have made an impact on the literary and the cartooning world. And so what Monty Bookshop did was get a lot of modern-day illustrators. Larry Day, one of our locals, is in here as well. And they wrote and drew biographies of these 16 cartoonists. So we have people like Charles Schultz, we have Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, we have Chaz Adams, we have Walt Disney, all sorts of wonderful people included in this book and the impact that they made, and all of the stories are done in this graphic novel format. Now, I do keep this one at a high school level, and here's why. Because if we're going to be talking about cartoonists, we do have to include Hugh Hefner. Exactly. And so there are a couple of pains within this book that some junior high boys would just go giddy over, if you know what I mean. So I do tend to keep this at the higher level, at the high school level, but it is a great, great book to have. Now this next book is going to make you feel like a slacker, because I know it did for me. And it is called No Summit Out of Sight. And this is the story of Jordan Romero. This is his story. At 9 years old, Jordan decided that he wanted to be the youngest kid to climb a mountain. And so, by the age of 10, he did in fact become the youngest person to ever climb Mount Kilimanjaro. But that wasn't enough for him, no. By the age of 15, he was the youngest person to summit, or to climb the 7 summits, the highest point on each of the continents. Here's me reading this book going, all right, I might as well just go to bed. But it is just an amazing story. It talks about how he was inspired in a school classroom, looking at a poster, to come up with this goal, to set this goal for himself, and then how he and his parents, all working together, set out to achieve these goals. If you also have Peak in your library, this is going to be a great fiction pairing to go along with this nonfiction book, No Summit Out of Sight. And then we have Paige Rawls' newest book, Positive. This is a book that I am saying every child, middle school, all the way through, and every adult, every parent, every teacher, every librarian, every person needs to read. Up until she was in 6th grade, Paige had a very normal Midwestern upbringing. She lived in Indianapolis. She was a vibrant go-getter at school. She was a cheerleader. She was popular. But then when she was in 6th grade, her mother let her in on a horrible secret that they had been keeping from Paige. And that was that Paige was born HIV positive. Well, that secret was too much for Paige to carry, so she turned to her best friend at the time to try and get some support. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way Paige expected, and shortly after opening up to her best friend, the secret got all over school, and Paige became the victim for bullies. People were spreading rumors that she had full-blown AIDS. They started calling her Paids, P-A-I-D-S, instead of Paige. She was the victim of some of the most horrific bullying I have ever read about. Paige went from being this vibrant, wonderful, straight-A, engaged student to hating school, becoming very depressed, and even contemplating suicide. She did, however, fortunately for us, get some therapy and come out of it, and has since written this book about that journey, and she is now a Red Cross certified HIV/AIDS educator and also speaks about bullying. I'd love to be able to stop there and just leave that book with you, but unfortunately we had a little situation at the bookstore a couple of days ago, and I'm so excited because I get to use a prop. So, excuse me for a minute while I get up on my soapbox. Okay, oh, this is really hot. I'm going to read to you a press release that we were forced to issue yesterday. Author school visit canceled during Band's Book Week. 20-year-old author Paige Rawle was scheduled to visit a Chicago area school district on Monday, but her plans were cut short this week when the superintendent abruptly canceled the event. Plans had been in the works since August to share Rawle's anti-bullying and HIV/AIDS education message with 3 schools, and the enthusiastic librarians, teachers, and counselors were prepped and ready for the visit. But on Monday, Anderson's Bookshop, who organized the visit, got word that the superintendent nixed the event, citing the fact that the district hadn't seen Rawle speak in person. Seriously. Right. Rawle, in town to promote her memoir Positive, was born HIV positive and experienced terrible bullying during middle school as a result. Her memoir details her experiences, both good and bad, with her fellow students, school officials, and coaches. The news comes at the end of Banned Book Week, a national celebration for the freedom to seek and express ideas, even those some consider unorthodox or unpopular. While Positive has not been banned by any local school districts, the timing of this cancellation is interesting. We were floored. I'm going to get off just because I'm afraid I'm going to fall. We were absolutely appalled that anybody in this day and age would remove the opportunity for their students to hear about what happens when you are the victim of bullying, but how you can rise above. Paige's message is a message of forgiveness, it is a message of hope, it is a message of education. Paige will be signing with us at the Naperville store on Monday. I would encourage every single one of you to come and hear her message. And as Becky mentioned the other day, what happened to Paige with this school district, she was bullied all over again, and we are not going to stand for that. So I just wanted to... come on out and show her that that one district is not representative of our entire area. Okay, off the soapbox now. Moving on, some assembly required. This is the autobiography of Aaron Andrews, who is a transgender teen. And this is his story of what it was like growing up, knowing that you were in the wrong body, of what it was like having parents that weren't necessarily accepting, of coming to the realization that you are in the wrong body and you need to make the transition, and then that process. So this is his story, coming from an actual transgender. You may recognize the name Aaron Andrews because at the beginning of the year, he and his girlfriend, Katie Hill, who is also a transgender, got some wonderful national press because they were one of the first openly transgender couples. They've since broken up. He does talk about their relationship, but they've remained friends and supportive of each other. So what sets this book apart, I think, from some of the others, that again, is that this is his voice, his journey, so he is a great resource. Then we have Stuff Matters. This is by Mark Miodownik. I'm sure I massacred that name, but we're going to go with it. He is the director for the Institute of Making at University College London. I didn't believe that was an actual title. I Googled it. It is. But he decided that, again, in a very lighthearted way, show us how physical science is all around us and it affects our daily life. So this book opens up with a picture of him sitting on his patio drinking a cup of tea. And then he proceeds to then tell us all about the natural science, the physical science of 10 of the elements that are in that picture. Whether it be the concrete of the patio, the glass of his cup, even the tea that's in his cup. He continues to go on and talk about it in this very lighthearted way. And you learn all sorts of amazing things. Like, for instance, did you know that our generation is one of the first generations to not taste the utensils we use to eat with because of the invention of stainless steel? My cooking is bad enough. Now I add a taste of iron if you were using iron cutlery. So just some interesting tidbits in there, again, written in a very lighthearted way. Moving on to novels. The first one is 100 Sideway Miles. This is classic Andrew Smith humor and language. So again, this is going to be a high school only, but this is a story about Finn, who is a 16-year-old, seemingly average, normal, everyday guy, with a couple of exceptions. Number one, he has grand mal epilepsy, so he is prone to seizures. And again, as most epileptics will tell you, can't really control when they come on. So he's dealing with that stigma of, you know, at any point in time, he could go in and he could have a convulsion. The other thing that sets him apart is that his father is a world-famous author. And in his latest best-selling book, he has created a character that is named Finn and based on Finn. It just so happens that this character is also an alien. So Finn is feeling a little bit more of an outcast in his family. But again, classic, good Andrew Smith humor. I will warn you, there is a hysterical condom buying scene in this book. Do not be drinking anything when you read it. My version is now coffee stained because I snorted coffee out my nose as I was reading. Anatomy of a Misfit. This is a story about 15-year-old Annika Dauber. She is the third most popular girl at her high school in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Annika is a character that I just loved because she is sassy and foul-mouthed. So again, because of the language, this is going to be high school. But this particular school year, Annika has decided that she has lived under Becky's thumb long enough. And Becky is the most popular girl in school for the HBIC. And so Annika has decided that this year, she is going to spend the school year undoing all of the dastardly deeds that Becky has done. Very funny, but also some very poignant and thoughtful moments when Annika is starting to see some of the victims as actual people and not just targets. And then we have the Evil Librarian. Really? Do you need me to say anything more? Or do you just want to buy this book and put it on your shelf so when your students are complaining, you can just point to the book and say, yeah, it could be worse. This is the story of Sin and her best friend Annie. And Sin is just so super excited because her best friend Annie finally has a crush on a boy. And Sin was getting a little worried about Annie there in high school. Until Sin discovers who Annie's crush is. It's the new librarian, Mr. Gabriel. Sin's not real thrilled about that. There's a major ick factor, but then things go from bad to worse when Sin discovers a secret about Mr. Gabriel and why he's attracted to Annie. Let's just say it includes horns and a tail and some demons. So Sin's got to figure out a way to save her friend Annie before she becomes Mr. Gabriel's favorite treat, shall we say. And then we have Falling Into Place. Think of this as It's a Wonderful Life for teens. This is going to be great for fans of Lauren Oliver, Jay Asher, John Green. Liz Emerson is the main character of the story, although she's not necessarily your narrator. Liz was the most popular girl in school until one day after classes, as she was driving home, her car went off the road and hit a tree. Liz was the only person in the car. She is critically injured and is now clinging to life in the hospital. The story is told all through flashbacks as her friends and family come to the hospital, surround her bed, willing her to come back to them. And we start to understand who Liz was and the fact that maybe this accident wasn't necessarily an accident, but that it was Liz's attempt at taking her own life. Fat Boy versus the Cheerleader. This is a great coming-of-age novel for boys, and we just don't have a whole lot of those. There is a little bit of language in this, so I would keep this again at the high school level. Gabe, aka Chunk, is our main character, and he is your typical nerd. He doesn't have many friends, he's in the band, and he is addicted to soda, and he's overweight. So he's kind of a recluse. But things start to change for him when his beloved band program is being threatened of being cut at the school, and so he decides that this is a crusade that he must take. And so doing that and getting some help from his grandfather, not only does Gabe become a more secure, active young man, he also starts to transform, which then gives him a little bit more courage and a little bit more security. It's just a good, feel-good novel for boys, and like I said, we don't have a whole lot of those. I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. Yes, thank you. Jandy's first novel was The Sky Is Everywhere. I loved that book. To this day, it's still probably one of my top 10 young adult favorites. It took Jandy 4 years to write this next one, and when I got an advance copy of this, I was so scared to open it up and read it because A, it took her 4 years to write, and B, could it be possibly as good as The Sky Is Everywhere? It's even better. I could wax on for hours about this book. I'm just going to tell you very quickly that it is the story of two twins, Noah and Judy. Noah's biggest claim to fame is that he has a beautiful sister that even the popular boys want to date. Noah, unfortunately, cannot live up to that, and so he becomes the target for some of the bullies at school. The chapters are told in alternating verses. Noah and Judy are going back and forth as they talk about two significant events in their lives. Mortal Danger. This is a very dark book, but hopeful book. It's the story of Edie, and it starts off at a very dark point when Edie is considering suicide. She's got it all planned out. She walks to the bridge where she's going to throw herself off of, and then she is saved at the last minute by a handsome young man named Kian. And he offers her the opportunity of a lifetime, kind of like Faust. She makes a deal with the devil. We have Paper Airplanes, which is set in Guernsey in 1994. This is a great friendship story. Two girls who bond over dysfunctional families. It's no texting, no cell phones. The title refers to the fact that that's how they use to communicate. The paper airplanes are what they use to communicate while they are in class. So a good friendship story. Again, content, I keep this at the high school level. The Secret Sky is a heartbreakingly wonderful story about what we are willing to do for love. This is set in Afghanistan. It is forbidden love. You will need a box of Kleenex with you as you read this story. It is told from 3 different perspectives: the 2 star-crossed lovers and the cousin that turns them in to the Taliban. Vault of Dreamers is kind of sci-fi light is what I've been calling it. It is a great, I hesitate to call it dystopian novel, but it is about a performing arts school unlike no other, where instead of graduating, you get cut. That's the only way that you make it to the next grade, and Rosie is our main character, and we open up with the first part of the book with her trying to wade through this next round of cuts, and then afterwards she discovers a secret about the school. Young World is great for dystopian fans. This is set in New York City. This will be the first in a trilogy. It is about a sickness that has overtaken the world and kills anyone 18 years or older. So the world is run by tweens and teens. That should be enough to scare the pants off of us. Zach and Mia is going to be a great one for fans of Fault in Our Stars or for fans of the new TV show, The Red Band Society. Zach and Mia meet at a hospital. Zach has leukemia, is coming off treatments for that. Mia is coming off of cancer treatments and an amputation. They start off hating each other, but because of their common bond, develop a deep friendship. Close Your Eyes, Hold Hands is great dystopian for adults. This is a story about Emily, who is 16 years old, and there has been a nuclear meltdown at the power plant in Vermont, which has devastated the New England area, and Claire is left to wander the area trying to find food, safety, and shelter. We couldn't have this list, I couldn't put this list together without having some creepy goodness on there, so I added Help for the Haunted. This is brand new out of paperback, good, creepy ghost story. This is a story about a daughter who witnesses her parents' murder. Her parents were demonologists. She was the only witness to the crime, and now is trying to put her memories back together to solve the problem, to solve the murder. And then last but not least, we have In the Kingdom of Ice. This is a nonfiction book about George Washington DeLong's expedition to the North Pole in 1879. His ship was caught in ice for 2 years, which forced him and his sailors off the boat to trek across the polar ice caps and the Arctic ice field. And they thought they were walking towards the rescue. They weren't. They ended up walking towards their own death. It is gross, it is ooey-goozy, and just an absolutely mesmerizing tale of a piece of history in our own culture. And that is it. That was a really brief overview of some of our